In the moment of impact, everything seemed to slow down. The piercing screech of brakes, the acrid smell of rubber burning against the pavement, the windshield shattering inch by inch reflecting the driver's terrified face, the violent force tearing at my body and limbs. Then, accompanied by the screams of bystanders and the dull thud of bones breaking, I hit the ground hard. In the haze of my dazed mind, a torrent of blood gushed out like water from a broken bag, staining the concrete and the red velvet ring box in my hand. I blinked sluggishly. In my blurred vision, Jessica stood with her back to me, frantically checking her ex-boyfriend.
Are you okay? Did any shards hit you? That car was just two.
She suddenly froze, as if realizing something. Slowly and stiffly, she turned her head, her gaze sweeping over the shattered glass, the blood slowly spreading on the ground, and finally landing on my blood-soaked body. Her lips quivered, her meticulously made-up face blank. Large tears rolled down her cheeks. I stared at her face, a mix of sorrow and helplessness, and to my dismay, I felt a familiar pang of pity and reluctance.
Don't cry.
The weak words caught in my blood-filled throat. The next second, the man held her firmly, planting a kiss on her head.
Don't look.
Jessica clung to him in a gesture of intimacy and dependence, her heavy sobs muffled against his shoulder.
What do we do? I didn't mean to.
It's going to be okay. We'll figure this out.
It was as if they were the perfect couple. If Jessica wasn't wearing the custom wedding dress we had picked out together. If I wasn't the groom of today's wedding. Everything seemed so absurd and ironic. Amidst the bustling crowd, my world faded into darkness and silence. My unfinished wedding became my final farewell. The next second, I was jolted awake from the flashback, seeing Jessica's sweet and innocent face before me. Every bone and muscle in my body ached faintly. Pressing my dizzy forehead, I slowly realized that I seemed to have been given a second chance at life. At this moment, Jessica and I were standing at the entrance of the hotel lobby, her face glowing with happiness as we greeted the wedding guests.
Why are you staring at me like that? Silly, you're being silly again.
I forced a strained smile, suppressing the turmoil in my heart.
It's nothing.
But Jessica's mind was already elsewhere. She glanced at a new message on her phone, becoming visibly unsettled. I watched her gaze drift towards the door, her fingers turning pale from gripping her phone too tightly. Suddenly, I felt a cold calm wash over me. Jessica's anxiety lasted only 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, she seemed to make up her mind and looked at me with a slightly unnatural expression.
I think my face is getting oily. I'm going to find the makeup artist for a touch-up.
Before I could respond, she lifted her wedding dress and hurried out. Instinctively, I grabbed her wrist.
Don't rush, I'll go with you.
Her anxious expression froze, and she bit her lip unconsciously, then put on a playful look.
Silly, why would you come with me for a touch-up? Who will greet the guests and relatives?
I steadied myself, unconsciously tightening my grip.
My wife's makeup is still beautiful. There's no need for a touch-up.
The elders will be here soon. After we finish greeting the guests, we'll change our makeup anyway. We can touch up then.
Jessica stomped her foot in frustration but was distracted by her vibrating phone. She glanced at the message, her face turning pale, and forcefully broke free from my grip, running outside without a word of explanation. I looked down at the polished marble floor of the 5-star hotel and remained silent for a moment. I knew that message was from her ex-boyfriend, whom she couldn't forget. At this moment, that man was sitting in a car at the corner of the hotel, waiting for her. But what difference does it make if he's down on his luck? With just a short message, the woman I cherished for 3 years would abandon me without hesitation to run to him. I also knew that in 10 minutes, an out-of-control car would come crashing towards the three of us. And Jessica, to protect the man behind her, would push me under the wheels without a second thought. I had pursued Jessica for a year before she finally agreed to be with me. We first met at the convenience store where she worked the night shift. The first time I saw her, she had her hair tied up in a round bun, her fair face free of makeup, exuding a soft pinkish-white glow. She looked very cute.
Which eye of yours saw that I opened this bottle of drink? You want me to pay for it? Just a poor worker trying to scam money, aren't you?
I saw it. You did open this bottle of coffee.
Mrs. Smith glanced at the corner, a blind spot for the surveillance camera, a look of certainty flashing across her face.
You little brat, do you know that slander is a legal offense? I'm going to complain to the manager.
Seeing her finger almost touching the girl's nose, I stepped in front of the trembling girl.
Ma'am, I was just testing the new movie mode on my phone and happened to capture you opening the bottle and drinking half of it. Maybe you forgot after taking a phone call.
Mrs. Smith's face turned red and white before she finally threw $5 on the counter and left in a hurry.
Thank you. My name is Jessica. Let me buy you a drink.
I'm Michael.
Her innocent and pure smile felt like a soft feather gently touching my heart. For once, I stuttered. Growing up, I had received love letters from girls, but Jessica was the first girl who made my heart flutter.
I'm sorry, Michael. I have a troublesome younger brother, and my father has a gambling problem. Our family conditions are not good. That's why I work 2 jobs day and night to earn money, even breaking up with my boyfriend because of it. I don't want to be a burden to anyone.
Although I wasn't a rich second generation, my parents were both university professors, and our family was well off. I had also co-founded a startup with some classmates and secured our first angel investment. We were from different worlds. But I was determined, almost obsessively, to wait for her outside the convenience store every night and insisted on walking her home after her shift. A year later, she finally agreed to be with me. As I got to know Jessica better, I realized she was hesitant and indecisive in matters of the heart. She received little warmth from her family, making her exceptionally emotional.
I dedicated my life to my family, hoping to maintain that fragile bond. But I never imagined my emotional nature would make it difficult to sever ties with my past relationship.
Jessica told me her ex-boyfriend, Andrew, was her high school classmate. They both got into the same university.
After graduation, Andrew stayed in the big city to pursue his career, while I returned home under my parents' insistence to help with the family.
Due to the long distance and her parents' dissatisfaction with Andrew's background, they broke up. I didn't mind her past relationship, instead, it made me feel protective of her. During our relationship, I gave her all my patience, gentleness, and care. Over 3 years, I watched her smile more and more. Half an hour before the wedding, I watched her run out of the hotel without looking back. I lowered my eyes to our welcoming photo and made a decision. The guests were in an uproar. Jessica's father and brother stood up angrily, but a few of my friends, whom I had warned beforehand, held them back. Meanwhile, a few groomsmen pushed Andrew onto the stage, restraining his struggling shoulders. Under Jessica's panicked gaze, I smiled at her slightly.
Jess, your groom is someone else.
Amidst the rising murmurs, I took the microphone from the MC and addressed the guests.
I'm sorry you all had to witness this farce. This is the bride's ex-boyfriend. But, judging by their reluctance to part, perhaps I'm the one who should be leaving. Jess, you don't need to sneak around to see him before the wedding anymore. You don't need to act heartbroken and reluctant in front of him. You know, in the 3 years we've been together, I've always tried to give you whatever you wanted. Today's wedding banquet, this venue, I'm giving it to you. I always wanted you to be happy. But from now on, I can't walk this path with you anymore. I wish you happiness.
Jessica trembled, barely able to stand. She tried to reach for my hand, tears streaming down her face.
Michael, it's not what you think. I just wanted to say a proper goodbye to him. I do care about you. I really wanted to marry you and spend my life with you. Weren't you the one who always tolerated me? You said I could be myself with you, that I could do whatever I wanted and you'd still accept me. I know I was wrong this time. Please forgive me.
I looked at her tear-streaked face with indifference, surprised at my own calmness. I used to be unable to bear seeing Jessica shed a single tear. Even if her eyes reddened slightly, I would panic and almost want to offer her my heart. So this is what she looks like when she cries. It doesn't seem like such a big deal after all. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Andrew's face turn red with anger, his jaw clenched tightly. I smiled slightly and gently wiped away Jessica's tears. A glimmer of hope appeared in her eyes as she looked at me through her tears. She always knew how to soften my heart. In the 3 years we were together, I understood her thoughts better than she did. She was truly scared and genuinely regretful. I believed that when she got into that car and left me, she didn't intend to leave me for good. I also believed that in her previous life, when she instinctively pushed me away, she didn't realize the consequences. But, so what? Instinctive reactions are the most genuine. I've already experienced a life-altering event, I should have learned something from it. What's done is done. My sincerity is not so cheap. I sighed softly, taking off my groom's suit under her suddenly pale gaze.
Jess, I've always cherished you, fulfilling all your wishes and tolerating all your moods. I've always been the one to back down in our arguments, and I didn't mind. I've helped your family with their minor issues whenever I could. Your parents asked me to give your brother a job at my company after he graduated, and despite the pressure from my partners, I agreed. They asked for a dowry of $1 million and a riverside apartment for your brother, and I agreed to that too. I did all these things willingly, hoping you could be carefree and happy with me, like a little princess. I wanted to shield you from all the hardships. But Jess, there's one thing I've told you many times. I can't tolerate any form of infidelity or disloyalty. We're adults now, we can't have it all. From today on, I won't be the one who favors you anymore.
At my signal, the groomsman swiftly dressed Andrew in the groom's suit.
I turned my head slightly and smiled at him. Andrew, do you take Jessica to be your wife, to respect her, to love her, in poverty and wealth, and sickness and health, and good times and bad, to care for her forever? Do you?
You're insane. We only met before the wedding. We didn't do anything inappropriate. Is that a crime? It's your own fault that you couldn't make Jess forget about me. One text from me, and she ran out before the wedding. No matter how crazy you get, you're just a loser.
I calmly rolled up my sleeves. Well said, but not what I wanted to hear.
The next second, I punched him hard in the face. Andrew's head snapped to the side, and it took him a full 3 seconds to recover.
I picked up the microphone again and brought it close to his lips, my voice steady and gentle. Andrew, do you take Jessica to be your wife, to respect her, to love her, in poverty and wealth, and sickness and health, and good times and bad, to care for her forever? Do you?
Andrew's eyes were bloodshot with rage. He roared from his throat, breaking free from the groomsman's grip, and grabbed a champagne bottle from the stage to smash it over my head. I sidestepped, caught his hand, and with an elbow to his chest, threw him hard to the ground. Under the glaring spotlight, Amidst the cheers and jeers of the crowd, Andrew was repeatedly beaten by me, unable to fight back. On my fifth question, he weakly whispered two barely audible words.
I do. I do.
I straightened my slightly wrinkled shirt and smiled at Jessica.
Miss Jessica, the groom is ready. I wish you both a long and happy life together. This wedding banquet, consider it my gift to you.
At this moment, Jessica's hands were trembling uncontrollably. She didn't spare a glance at Andrew, but instead, she desperately lunged forward to grab my hand.
Michael. I was just confused for a moment. Why did you have to take it this far? Do you really not want me anymore? Why are you so ruthless, so unforgiving? How could you be so heartless?
I gently brushed away her trembling hand.
The heartless one isn't me.
Leaving the chaos behind, I walked away with my groomsmen friends, amidst Jessica's uncontrollable sobs. A few minutes later, I heard a loud slap and Mr. Johnson's furious roar.
Look at what you've done.
Jessica's sobs paused and then fell silent. I could almost feel her pleading gaze on my back. Yes, after 3 years of dating, I had fulfilled countless unreasonable demands from Mr. Johnson for her. Because of this, she received more attention at home. So much so that she forgot, the affection she received from her family wasn't as pure as she thought. I sighed softly and turned back. Jessica, with tears streaming down her face, covered one cheek and looked at me stubbornly and hopefully, her voice trembling.
Michael.
I silently watched her. Memories of her smiling face, her scrunched-up expression when she accidentally ate a sour orange, the dependence and closeness in her eyes when she looked at me, and her unhesitating figure running towards the hotel exit, flashed through my mind. After a long while, I smiled at her with relief.
Goodbye.
With Tom by my side, I calmly walked out of the wedding hall, apologizing to the guests who were leaving and arranging for them to have dinner at the upscale buffet restaurant next door. My parents sighed and patted my shoulder.
Jessica was never a good match.
I lowered my eyes slightly, hiding the warmth in them.
Dad, Mom, I've embarrassed you.
It doesn't matter. As long as you're happy and healthy, nothing else is important.
Tom, unwilling to let it go, put his arm around my shoulder.
Michael, you spent tens of thousands on this family, and you're just going to let them off like that?
I adjusted my glasses and smiled gently.
Jessica and I are over. I don't need to do anything more. What should come, will come.
Jessica had been spoiled by me. And her greedy family had long been accustomed to the benefits. All I needed to do was take back what never belonged to them, and the rest. I just needed to watch the show. I took a month off from my business partner and embarked on a month-long tour of Europe with my parents. It was both to relax and to avoid the entanglements of that family. A dowry of $1 million, a high-paying job, a newly delivered riverside apartment, plus various other benefits. Knowing Andrew, he couldn't possibly afford all that. Jessica hadn't contacted me again, but her father and brother nearly blew up my phone. When I didn't answer their calls, they started sending long messages. From emotional appeals to logical arguments, to veiled threats, I was surprised at how well they could write.
Next stop, let's take a hot air balloon ride in Cappadocia.
My parents readily agreed. My friend Tom back home kept me updated on Jessica's family's situation. Jessica seemed to be in a long period of depression. Her father and brother were pressuring her to beg for my forgiveness and reconciliation, but she stubbornly refused to disturb me. Perhaps they thought I would feel vindicated. There was no need to explain that I didn't care, I simply accepted their goodwill with gratitude. After more than half a month, the family finally quieted down. Had they given up, or were they planning something new? I didn't care, just enjoying the peace. But when I returned home with my parents and saw my villa in chaos, with Jessica's family brazenly inside, I fell silent. In just a month, Jessica seemed to have lost a lot of weight. Her once slightly plump cheeks were now sunken, and her chin was sharp. In contrast, her belly was slightly rounded.
Son-in-law, this isn't fair, is it? You got my daughter in trouble, and now you want to walk away? And causing such a scene at the wedding, shouldn't you compensate us for the emotional distress? Heck, of course, we're all family here. My daughter did get entangled with someone else, and I'm reasonable. You've vented your anger. My daughter's in trouble, and she knows she was wrong. Just go get the marriage certificate, and I won't ask for more dowry, the same as before.
Brother-in-law, didn't Apple just release a new model? You see.
I looked calmly at Jessica's evasive eyes.
Jess, how many months along are you?
Jessica lowered her head, her pale fingers twisted together.
4 months.
I was silent for a moment, my gaze sweeping over the dark red scars on her arm.
Is that so? In that case, you can stay here for now. We'll discuss everything else after the baby is born. I won't shirk my responsibilities.
Jessica bit her lip without speaking. John Johnson had already slapped my shoulder heavily, his tone threatening.
What do you mean by this, son-in-law? The child of my daughter's belly is yours, isn't it? Are you trying to deny it? Wait until the baby is born. Do you want my precious daughter to have a child out of wedlock? Our Johnson family has a reputation to uphold.
The sharp pain exploded in my shoulder. I just stared at Jessica's pale face, and after a long while, I smiled slightly.
5 million. After the baby is born, I'll give you 5 million as a dowry, and the other conditions remain the same.
John Johnson's breathing grew heavier. When he realized he couldn't argue further, he stumbled over a wine bottle and fell onto the sofa. I turned and left. In the days that followed, Jessica seemed to regain her spirit and began to focus on her pregnancy. She also tried to mend our relationship. She would send me photos of our past almost every day, sometimes with simple captions. Even I didn't know she had taken so many candid shots of our time together. The coffee we drank while watching the night view at the old pier. The top of her head when I knelt to tie her shoelaces. My focused profile while watching a movie. Our intertwined fingers reflected in a shop window. The convenience store sign where we first met. The candied hawthorn on a winter street, and the slightly pained yet indulgent look on my face when she handed me a particularly sour one. I looked down at the familiar photos on my phone, my lips pressing together as a headache began to throb at my temples. Just then, the receptionist called, her voice hesitant.
Mr. Johnson, your ex, Miss Jessica insists on coming up. She says she made soup for you. What should I do?
I saved the photo on my screen.
Call her a car and send her back. I have work to do and can't come down to see her.
About 10 minutes later, the receptionist called again to inform me that Jessica had left but insisted on leaving the thermos. I glanced at the message she sent.
Michael, I made pigeon soup with gastrodia for you this morning. When it gets cold, your headaches tend to act up. Remember to drink it. I'm heading back now.
I looked out at the gloomy, rainy sky and clenched my fist slightly. Half an hour later, it started to pour as I escorted my partner's sister back to the consultation room. I was holding an umbrella, ready to see her to the car, when Jessica suddenly rushed out from a corner, drenched and looking shocked.
Michael, who is she?
I ignored Jessica and gently motioned for the girl to get into the car, carefully arranging her dress.
Take care on the road.
Is it her?
I smiled without answering. The girl then nodded politely at Jessica.
Hello, you must be Michael's ex-girlfriend, Jessica. I'm Emily. I've heard a lot about you.
The color drained from Jessica's face.
You too.
Don't get the wrong idea. Michael and I are just friends, not what you're thinking.
Jessica seemed slightly relieved, but Emily added with a smile.
I did write Michael several love letters back in college, but unfortunately, he rejected them all.
You're too old to be saying such things. Anyway, the matter is settled. You should go now.
See you next time.
As the car drove away, Jessica clung desperately to my arm, her eyes wild.
Who is she? Michael, who is she? How can you move on so quickly?
Emily and I are not what you think. I haven't moved on. You're still carrying a child. You shouldn't be out in the rain or getting too emotional.
Jessica clutched the hem of her loose dress, her eyes glistening with tears.
Michael, I don't feel well. Can you take me home?
I lowered my eyes, looking at her bloodless fingertips from gripping too hard, and spoke calmly.
I'll call an ambulance for you. If possible, I'll have Andrew come to take you. You shouldn't go back to that house.
But Jessica couldn't hear anything anymore. She bowed her head in silence for a long time, then suddenly gave me a pale smile.
I understand. It's my fault. I won't make things difficult for you anymore. But I still want to do something for you. When the baby is born safely, I'll take the child and leave, never to bother you again. But before that, please give me some time to slowly detach myself from this relationship. Didn't you used to love the soup I made? I just want to make soup for you for 6 more months, is that okay? This might be the only thing I can do for you in the time I have left.
A tear hung on her eyelash, ready to fall. Amidst the pattering rain, I heard my own indifferent and calm voice.
All right.
The weak words caught in my blood-filled throat. Don't cry. The man held her firmly, planting a kiss on her head.
Don't look.
Jessica clung to him in a gesture of intimacy and dependence, her heavy sobs muffled against his shoulder.
What do we do? I didn't mean to.
The man held her tightly, comforting her softly. It was as if they were the perfect couple. If Jessica wasn't wearing the custom wedding dress we had picked out together.
If I wasn't the groom of today's wedding.
Amidst the bustling crowd, my world faded into darkness and silence. My unfinished wedding became my final farewell. I remember now. I didn't come back to life. It wasn't me who perished in the car accident, but my beloved girlfriend, Jessica. At that time, I was holding a pre-prepared engagement ring, filled with joy and nervous anticipation to propose to Jess. On her way to meet me, Jess saw her sister Jennifer arguing with her boyfriend Andrew on the street. Anxious to intervene, Jess rushed forward. In the next moment, a car lost control and sped towards them. In the ensuing chaos, Jennifer instinctively pushed Jess towards the oncoming vehicle. I stood 5 meters away, witnessing the entire accident unfold. In a daze, I saw a torrent of blood gush out like water from a broken bag, staining the concrete and the red velvet ring box in my hand. Jennifer, with her back to me, frantically checked Andrew for injuries.
Are you okay? Did any debris hit you? That car was just 2.
She stopped mid-sentence, slowly and stiffly turning to see Jessica's blood-soaked body. The next second, the man gently pulled her into his arms and planted a kiss on the top of her head.
Shoo, don't look.
They embraced intimately. Meanwhile, I knelt in the pool of blood like a broken doll, holding Jessica's lifeless, shattered body, and lost consciousness in overwhelming grief. It felt as if a part of me had died with her. When I woke up, I was suffering from severe post-traumatic stress disorder, and my memory was fragmented and distorted. Unable to accept Jessica's death, I mistook Jennifer for Jessica when I regained consciousness in the hospital. They were sisters, after all, and though their personalities were different, their features were strikingly similar. I forgot about the proposal, the car accident, and that she had a sister. I forgot so many things. Taking advantage of my memory loss, Mr. Johnson, who was dissatisfied with Andrew's family background, had Jennifer impersonate Jessica and continue the relationship with me, leading to marriage discussions. In the web of lies they carefully wove in Jennifer's deliberate imitation, I projected all my love for Jessica onto Jennifer. To me, she was my beloved. As the wedding approached, my headaches grew increasingly severe. On the day of the wedding, I remembered the car accident that led to Jessica's passing. Except, I had empathized so deeply that I became Jessica in my mind. John Johnson, Jennifer, and Johnny Johnson were all arrested by the police. Due to her condition, Jennifer was released on bail. John Johnson and Johnny Johnson weren't so lucky. I provided the police with evidence of their plot to harm me. The tonic Jennifer brought me daily was found to contain heavy water, a colorless and tasteless substance that causes chronic liver and kidney damage. The wine she poured for me also contained neurotoxins that accelerated liver and kidney failure. John Johnson and Johnny Johnson were the masterminds behind the poison. They would all face the justice they deserved. On the other hand, Jennifer's lawyer conveyed her message to me. She was willing to turn state's evidence in exchange for seeing me one last time. I agreed. In just a few days, Jennifer seemed to have lost all her vitality. Her chin was sharp, and her belly looked alarmingly large. When she saw my gaze fall on her abdomen, she gently touched her belly and whispered,
"When did you know this child wasn't yours?"
I calmly poured her a glass of water.
When you first told me you were 4 months pregnant.
Seeing her surprised look, I smiled slightly.
4 months ago, I was in Milan, Italy, attending an investment and trade forum for a week. Before that, I was in Silicon Valley with my partner, attending an entrepreneur forum and exploring the latest trends in AI and venture capital for 2 weeks. And for another week, I was in an American hospital with my partner, who had an emergency appendectomy. I was away the entire month. You even got very upset with me because of it. When I returned, I made you breakfast for a whole month before you finally forgave me. Don't you remember?
Jennifer didn't answer, just gave a faint, bitter smile. I handed her the glass of water.
Moreover, Andrew found me and told me everything.
On the day Jennifer told me she was pregnant, I was stopped on the street by a vaguely familiar figure. It was Andrew. He looked disheveled, with a scruffy beard and bloodshot eyes. I gave him a cold glance and was about to walk past him when he grabbed my shoulder.
The child she's carrying is mine.
So?
He clutched his head in agony.
We reconnected at a class reunion 4 months ago. I didn't want to go, but the class president insisted, and I was curious to see how she was doing. But the moment I saw her, I realized I still couldn't forget her. At the reunion, she mentioned she was getting married. I drank a lot, and she came to comfort me, and then I know she still has some feelings for her past, but her heart is mostly occupied by you.
I furrowed my brows slightly, having lost all patience with his incoherent words. I coldly brushed his hand away.
So, you're here to speak on her behalf? Then why tell me you're the child's real father?
John Johnson and his family don't think much of me. They'd rather let her use the child as leverage against you. Don't let them deceive you.
I nonchalantly dusted off my shoulder.
Mr. Andrew, it's their family that's clinging to me. They don't care about the little they can get from you. They've decided I'm their ideal son-in-law. If you consider yourself so devoted, is the only solution you can think of to come to your former rival and hope he'll be magnanimous enough to let you have your way? Maybe you've come to the wrong person?
Ignoring the despondent Andrew, I turned and walked away. What he didn't know was that when he shouted, "She still holds more space in her heart for you," my in-ear headphones were also transmitting the Johnson family's schemes. My villa was equipped with the latest security system on the market. Although Jennifer had gained entry using my fingerprint key that I hadn't yet deleted, everything they did was under my surveillance. From the first day they entered the villa, my phone had been receiving alerts from the security system. I knew John Johnson had racked up a mountain of gambling debts and was desperate for me to pay them off. I knew Johnny Johnson had gotten into a fight at a nightclub and accidentally injured someone severely. Without enough compensation, he'd be facing jail time. I also knew Jennifer had sold all the gifts I had given her but still couldn't cover the holes her father and brother had dug. In my earphones, Mr. Johnson was using a mix of threats and persuasion on Jennifer.
Michael is not easily fooled. Once the child is born, he's likely to demand a paternity test, and then everything will be exposed. Jennifer, that guy used to be head over heels for you. There's no reason he'd suddenly become so heartless. Sweet talk him. You must get the marriage certificate before the child is born. I've already picked out a hefty life insurance policy. Once you're officially married, get Michael insured. If anything happens to him, you'll be the primary beneficiary of his estate. With the insurance payout, your brother and I will be set for life.
I instinctively rubbed my fingers, waiting for Jennifer's response. On the other end, Jennifer was silent for a moment before barely audibly agreeing. It was like a stone had suddenly dropped. I closed my eyes lightly and let out a soft laugh. Jennifer's face showed a mix of crying and laughing.
You knew from the beginning that my bringing you soup had ulterior motives?
I nodded. I also knew that since you couldn't wait for me to come back, you decided to abandon the marriage certificate plan and intended to end my life so the child could inherit the estate.
Jennifer was silent for a long time.
Michael, whether you believe it or not, I never intended to harm you. When you were dating my sister, I envied her so much. I envied her for finding such a considerate and perfect boyfriend. I envied the way you always looked at her with such gentle eyes. I envied why my own boyfriend was so ordinary and unremarkable. At that time, when you woke up in the hospital and looked at me with such gentle and longing eyes, I couldn't bring myself to tell you that I wasn't Jessica. My dad and brother indeed had ulterior motives towards you, but I genuinely fell in love with you. This child was just an accident. I owe Andrew something. I once had feelings for him, but after meeting you, I realized my feelings for him were a joke. Like comparing the light of a firefly to the sun and moon. Michael, the only person I've truly loved is you. But why are you so heartless? I just secretly met him once before the wedding. I just couldn't accept that in front of you. I always had to pretend to be my sister, while in front of him, I could be Jennifer. But I really wanted to spend my life with you. Even if I could never use my own name, I was willing.
Under my calm and indifferent gaze, her growing agitation suddenly calmed down, her voice as gentle as winter sunlight.
Michael, I just loved you too much. If I can't have you, then completely possessing you isn't bad, is it?
I closed my eyes briefly and stood up.
If there's nothing else to say, I'll take my leave.
Jennifer suddenly grabbed my hand, her cold fingers interlacing with mine, holding on tightly, her eyes stubborn and pleading.
Michael, was there ever a day, even a moment, when you looked at me, the person, And not this face that deliberately mimicked my sister's expressions and gestures?
I looked down at the last flicker of light in her eyes, like a flame about to go out, and slowly pried her fingers apart.
No.
The air seemed to freeze for a moment. Jennifer's lips trembled, but she made no sound. The light in her eyes seemed to turn to ashes. Based on Jennifer's testimony, John Johnson and Johnny Johnson were sentenced to 8 years in prison for attempted poisoning. On the day of the sentencing, Jennifer endured a difficult labor in the hospital for a whole day and night, finally giving birth to a baby boy. Andrew took her away. As for how she's doing, I don't really care. The unattainable is always in turmoil. Those who are favored are fearless. When the unattainable becomes attainable, and the favored lose their favor, how far can they go, relying on those vague memories of youth? I came to Jessica's grave, bringing a bouquet of her favorite oil painting peonies. It was deep winter, the north wind was fierce, and the air was cold. I leaned against her cold tombstone, talking to her about the events of the past years, just like I used to. Jess, I'm sorry it took me so long to remember you.
You must have waited a long time. I'm a coward, weaving a fantasy that you didn't pass away, which gave others an opportunity. Do you remember Emily? She's my partner's sister and a psychology PhD. Thanks to her help, although it took a lot of time and a hefty fee, I finally remembered everything. Was it you reminding me from the beyond? That's why I remembered the car accident before the wedding, although not very accurately. Jennifer asked me if I fell in love with her during that year she took your place. To be honest, I'm not sure. But when everything is built on lies, seeking that tiny bit of truth is meaningless, isn't it?
Apart from the sound of the wind, the world was silent. A snowflake fell into my palm. It was the first snow of the winter. After a while, I stood up, brushed the snow off my shoulders, and carefully wiped the snow from the tombstone. If we could share the snow in the future, it would be like growing old together. I slightly curled my lips at Jessica's smiling photo. Jess, thank you. I too must continue to move forward.